Bienvenidos, Ushamdid, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the Spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this tutorial, we're going to be diving into Module 4 and looking at the Postman API development platform. So let's start out with what we're going to learn in this module. We're going to learn about Postman as a graphical user interface for API platform building, testing, and in short, you can think of Postman as a GUI-based HTTP client, as opposed to a text-based client like a Python script, although we're going to see some Python scripts in this video. Leveraging Postman, we can create workspaces like test, dev, and prod. And then inside of those workspaces, we can organize our API work into collections like GET requests, POST requests, etc. And finally, we can have Postman actually generate the Python code based on our REST API calls that we're placing in Postman. It's pretty amazing, and that is what I'm going to be showing you how to do today. So let's dive in and see how we can leverage Postman to aid in the development of REST API calls. And we're going to be using Postman's Echo server, but I'm also going to be using our DEVASC virtual machine. So let's go ahead and pull Postman up here, and there is the icon. I'm on my host machine right now. You can get Postman for the Mac, for Windows, as well as Linux. Now, I am actually logged in. In the course, on the virtual machine, you do not have to create an account. However, I would highly encourage you to do so because creating an account is going to open up some additional functionality to you that would not be available otherwise. And so here with Postman, let's take a look at the four major parts that we have here. We've got the header area of Postman where you can see the My Workspace. We've got New, Import, and then some tabs over here. And so that's the header area. On the sidebar, we've got our collections, APIs, environments, and so on. You've got the builder area, which is the area right in here. And then we've got the response area, which is where we're going to see our REST API responses, whether that's a GET or a PUT. And so on that same subject, if I was to click on this little arrow here to kind of orient you to what we're going to be looking at, we're really interested in the top 5 options that you see here. So we've got GET request. Now I want you to, when you hear GET, I want you to think that it's a read request. When you see delete, it's obviously going to be a delete request. We're going to be removing something. Now, the 3 that cause the most confusion in terms of the options are patch, post, and put, because it's not really clear which one's doing what and how they're different from each other. And so let's go ahead and put it like this. The post method is used to submit data that you would submit on an online form of some kind and submit it. So if I'm submitting data in an online form, you can think of that as a post request, while the put method is used to update an existing resource on the server. So post is submitting data via an online form of some kind. That's one example. And then put, the put method, is updating a resource on the server. Now, you might be wondering about the patch method. So the patch method is used for partial updates to an existing resource on the server. Now, you might be saying, well, wait a second. You just said that put updates an existing resource. So what's the difference between those two? Well, remember, patch is a partial update. Put is used for a full update to a resource. And again, the post method is used for submitting data that's going to be processed. So get, post, put, patch, delete. Those are really the ones that we're going to be interested in this course. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the options that we have here. Now remember, I'm logged in, so I'm going to create a workspace. You can see I've already created a workspace for the course. However, let's go ahead and create a new workspace. What's the name going to be? I'll just call it YouTube Videos. A summary? This is my workspace for all the tutorials I do for YouTube. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the default so that any team members that I might invite will have access. So now let me create that workspace. And you can see here, this is the YouTube videos workspace. When I click up here, we now have that workspace. We also have my workspace, where again, I haven't left or created anything here. And then we've got the AACC workspace, where I'm already putting together some get, post, and practice requests. But let's take a step back to our newly created YouTube videos workspace. Now that I've created this workspace, I could invite team members if I wanted to. However, for this, we're now going to be focused on what it is we want to do here, and that's going to be collections. So if I was to click on the plus sign right here, I can create a new set of collections. And again, this is just simply a logical grouping, a folder, if you will, in which I am going to go ahead and place my GET requests. And again, you can organize things any way you see fit. And I just hit enter right there. If I wanted to change the name, I could simply click on the little pencil right here. And now when I fold this down, we can see the requests that are here. So we don't have any requests. So let's go ahead and let's leverage the Postman Echo server and let's add a request here. So this is going to be a very simple request, and I'm going to name this request. And as soon as I start to type the name in, you'll notice that my changes over here, I don't have any new changes, but once I give it a name, I'm going to be able to save it, and you're going to see that right up here with the tab. Now, I could leave this open, but you know what? It doesn't really need to be open. The overview really doesn't need to be open. So now let's just get down to the GET request here. So you can see it's new request. I'm going to change the name, and we're going to put in here Postman Echo Server GET request, GET request -001. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and so that is going to be the name of the new GET request. Now, if this was going to be a post or a put or a patch or a delete, I would simply select the drop-down arrow here and pick the appropriate HTTP method. However, for this, we're going to do a GET request. So I'm simply going to say http://postman-echo.com. Now, that is going to be the URL that I'm using for this GET request. And what I would expect to see would be maybe the HTML that is on that page. So when I click send, you'll notice that down here below, we get some interesting information. We get all of the HTML code, and you can see it's formatted here as HTML. We also over here can check and see the status of our request. So I see the 200 OK. That's one we're very familiar with. How many milliseconds did it take for me to receive the information back? And what I love about Postman is it breaks everything down for you, from the DNS lookup time to the TCP handshake to the SSL handshake to the transfer start to the download time. And you get all of those times, and you get a really nice snapshot as to how long it took for this request to do what it needed to do. And then we get the size of the response. Now we get it broken down. We get the size of the body as well as the headers. And I'm going to show you in a Python script how you can actually get the body size and how you can check to make sure that the information you're receiving is true or correct. Now I can also kind of raise this up here if I wanted to get a little bit more space. And so basically what we have down here is all of the HTML, and we've got some CSS in here as well. But it's basically the code that's used on the main postman-echo.com site. Now, postman-echo.com gives us some additional functionality as well. And again, Postman is the HTTP, or you can think of it as the API client in this scenario. That server, postman-echo.com, that is the server. And so I'm going to send another API request. Now this time I've put the /get in here. So let's go ahead and click send. And now it's going to return to me JSON data, right? I'm no longer saying, hey, just, give me whatever is at postman-echo.com. Now I'm doing an HTTP GET specifically here for this JSON data. Now, in this JSON data, we can see there were no arguments that needed to be provided. We've got the HTTP headers that come back. And remember, these are the response headers, right? And there's three major components in the HTTP response headers. You've got the HTTP status, and again, we see that status right up here. You've got the HTTP headers, and then you've got the body. And so we end up seeing the status code, the time, the size, and we get this information here. But these are the headers that are being used that the server is responding to us with. It's telling us that the user agent was Postman runtime. We've got a token type of a coding that's going to be accepted. We've got the cookie here, and then most importantly, the URL that we actually hit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build this response out. And you might be saying, well, wait a second, what if I wanted to, I don't want to have to sit here and edit this, take that back if I want to rerun this like this to get the HTTP code. And you know what? Let's just do a control click. And let's duplicate that tab. And when we duplicate that tab, it's going to have the same name, so we can change that. And we'll just say it's going to be get request 002. I'm going to put the /get in here. And so everything that was in there, and let's click save, everything that was in there was still in there for me, and I just needed to attach the get. So now we've got here, we've just got the postmanecho.com. I can click save on that. And it looks like, hold on, we've got a conflict here. What did I misname it there? Yeah, I'm sorry. So let's change this to 1, and we'll click save. Save and overwrite, and that should be, I see what it's doing here. So what's ended up happening right now is I went ahead and I duplicated the tab. However, it's tying the names together for both of these, and that is not what we want. And so let me go ahead and do 002 here, which should not impact, or we should do a save as. And there we go. So we'll do a save as, and I apologize because as I'm saving it, it's changing both tabs. So I could put it under my get requests. And I guess the other one is 01 or 02, so we'll save this as 01. So now we have 01 and we have 02. Even though they're kind of backwards, that's okay. So I can simply duplicate the tab, save the request. We can reorder the tabs, and then here I can just add in my /get, go ahead and click on save, and now when I send this, I'm going to get the JSON code. So you'll also notice that over here, I can now collapse this, I can expand it out. If I wanted to change workspaces, I could do that, but this is allowing me to kind of collect up all of the GET requests that I would like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the tab again, this time not making the same mistake. We're going to go with save as, and this is going to be 003, and I'm going to click save. So we're working on a new request, a new GET request, and what we can do here is we can use some keys. Well, how do I tell the URL that we're going to have some keys in here? So specifically, how would I tell Postman? Well, I can click down here and put the key in, or I can type it in here. So if I put a question mark, you'll notice what happens immediately. It put this check here. And what that check means is that as soon as I drop the question mark, it knows that a key is getting ready to follow. And so really, I'm kind of providing some arguments here. So I'm going to say test equal 1, 2, 3. And you see what happened there. The key is test. The question mark tells HTTP that, hey, a key is going to follow here, and then the value follows the equal sign. And again, I could make it 1, 2, 3. I could make it 8675309. But let's save that request. So now we've got these 3 requests that we can always go back and take a look at. And let's go ahead and click send. And you can see right here that that argument, right, that we sent in with test and 8675309 goes in there as the key. So very, very cool. All right, well, what if I wanted to add another collection like post requests? Well, you would just set that up and say post requests. I just hit enter, and now we've got post requests. What if you wanted to add delete requests? And I think you get the idea after this, so I could say delete requests. And again, you can organize things in the way that makes sense to you and create a workspace based on maybe it's your class that you're taking at your school. All right, well, that is going to close out the host-based Postman examples that I was going to do here. What I'm going to do now is let's transition over to the virtual machine. that we're going to be using for the course. And you can see I've already opened Postman up. It's on the desktop of the virtual machine. And you can see that we've got some testing that might have been taking place earlier. We've got some post requests in here. We've got some get requests in here. And what we're using is we're using the library. Now, you might be wondering what the library is. If I pull up our Chromium web browser, you can see that we have on this virtual machine a school library of sorts. And I've added in The Sun Also Rises. Now, this library, if you click right up here on here, and you can't click anywhere else, it has to be on the word here. It would have been nice if they maybe underlined it, did an all caps thing, but if you click there, you get the School API Library documentation. And let's take a look here. So here's a GET request that we can use to get a list of the books. So what would that look like using Postman? And you can see here, we've got a GET request that basically goes down the URI. And if we're breaking this down, you can see that what follows, this is the path. That is the path to the resource that we're trying to get to. This is basically the address, right? And then this is how we're going to connect. And it could be HTTP or HTTPS. I typically just say HTTP in the videos, but it can be either HTTP or HTTPS. So let's run this and click send. And you can see we're going to get a list of all of these books. And we're going to get it in JSON format. So this is basically our library. Now, here's the thing, which is extremely, extremely cool about Postman. Over here, you'll notice there's a little option that shows the less than / greater than, and it says code. If you click on this, I want you to take a look at the incredible amount of languages that are available here to choose from, where you can click on any of these, and let's choose Python using the requests module. And it's going to give me the Python code that I can literally cut and paste. And let's do that right now. And I'm going to copy this code right now. And we could take that and we could take it into VS Code possibly. And so let's go ahead and create a new file. And that was a different one there. And we're going to say it's a Python file. It's untitled. That's okay. We'll give it a name later. We'll do a control paste. So there's the code. So let's go ahead and let's save our file here. And I can say save all, and we can do a new untitled file, but I'm just going to say file and then save. You can do control S. And let's just go ahead. We're going to leave this on the desktop right now. And be aware that when you do the file save, it opens the dialog behind VS Code. At least that's the behavior that I've been experiencing. And so we're just going to simply call this YouTube GET request, or we'll say YouTube GET 001.py. And so now this file has been saved. So let's see if this does what we needed to do. Remember, this library.demo.local, this is local on the virtual machine for the course. So when I click run and then run without debugging, what are we going to see down here? Well, there it is. We see exactly what we saw in Postman. So as I pointed out earlier, Postman is simply a graphical user interface that we can use, a platform that we can use with a GUI in order to test our API calls. And then once we're satisfied that, you know what, that's the API call I'm looking for, and I'm getting the response back that I want, then I could take that code and integrate it into a larger Python program possibly. So those are the GET requests. Now let's take a look at how we would do, oops, sorry, I wanted to stay in the virtual machine, how we would do a post request. So let's take a look at the first post request here, and let's run this and see what we get. So remember, when we're doing post requests, that is like you're submitting something like a form online of some kind possibly, and that's what we did here, and we get a token back. Now, when you're doing this in Lab 4.5.5 and you reach this step, in order to get the token, that token is going to be used later on over here. And we can take a look. We don't have any parameters. When I look at the authorization, you can see that we're using an XAPI key, or we're using that token as an XAPI key. And so then we put the value of the token down here, and we're going to add it to the header. So let's take a look at the headers, right? So when I click on the headers here, you can see it shows key, and it doesn't show anything else. Although it's indicating it has 9, they're hidden. So those headers are going to be automatically added and sent with the request, but we want to expand those out to see what they are. So we've got the XAPI key. Remember, we added that in under the authorization area. The Postman token, that gets calculated when the request is sent. The content type, in other words, we're going to tell the application that, hey, we're sending an application JSON. We've got the content link that's going to be calculated when the request is sent. And if I was to scroll down just a little bit further here, let's try to drag that down a little bit, you can see that we've got the host, we've got the user agent, which is the Postman runtime, the accept encoding, and our connection. So those are the headers that make up our HTTP, or I should say our post request, HTTP post request that we're sending into this library server. Again, a lot of stuff going on here in the header. Let's go ahead and click on the code and take a look at what that might look like. And you can see we're using JSON dumps. And that's a module, JSON, that we're going to be importing and using along with requests. But again, it gives you an idea when you can take a look at the code and say, oh, okay, so this is how I would specify the payload information for the ID, the title, the author, the ISBN, and then the header information that I'm going to receive. But we're not done yet, because you might be wondering, well, where does this payload come from? Because we don't want to put the same book in there. So if I click on body, again, we're posting. So we're going to be submitting this, and we're going to be adding to, right? We're going to be adding to this library. So let's go ahead and change the title here. So we'll do The Sun Also Rises, and we'll say, I can't think of another book other than, we'll put the Unix Bourne Shell. And the author is Stephen Bourne. And I think it's Phen. And we'll say that it is 987654321. Right? So this is going to be the information that we are posting, and we've got the access code, but let's see what happens here. So I'm going to go back to parameters. We'll click on save because we've changed it, and we're going to keep it. And you can see we get back here null, 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 even though we've got the OK response, the 5 milliseconds. Now, this is one of the benefits of Postman, is I can simply go back here and click on this and say, okay, well, I just want to check and see if it got added in. So did that get added in? And yes, it did. ID 90, I'm sorry, it kept the same ID of 99, the Bourne Shell, and Stephen Bourne. Now you'll notice what we don't see here is we're not seeing the ISBN number. Well, why is that? Well, that's because we would have to add those parameters in. So here, and we can learn this by taking a look at the API, and it wasn't the post. It's going to be, I think, login. I'm sorry, not login via basic. I think it is in the posts book. And hold on just one second. Or was the login via JSON? No, I don't believe it was login via JSON. I found it. It was in here. And I'm trying to remember where I saw that information in here. Application JSON. And that is what we wanted for the responses, and I think we're going to leave it there. Again, in the documentation here somewhere, it's going to let you know, and actually we want to pop back out over here, it's going to let you know that you can add in these parameters. Again, these are just like keys, so take a look. We have the URI all the way down to the resource we're trying to get to, and then the question mark is a separator saying what follows will be my keys. Well, I want to include the ISBN number in the output, and that is going to be equal to true. By default, it's equal false. And then I've got another key. So the ampersand says, and this key. And if there was another key after author, I would have and this other key value pair. Now, we can click on the code button, and we can see right here how we would add in headers, data payload, and we see the information from the import request. We have the URL with all of our information in there. Payload and headers is blank because we have it all inside the request right now. But let's click send, and now you can see that it's going to be displaying for us the ISBN number. Now, again, the include ISBN and sort by author, that was included in the GET request up here, which is why our payload and headers Python dictionaries, which are our key value pairs, are empty. If we wanted to remove all of that from the request, from the URL variable, we could certainly do that and then add that information down here into the payload area. But as I explained, this is a very valuable tool to be able to see the Python code that this request would be generating out of the GUI. So we scroll down a little bit here and let's see if our Unix-born shell made it, and it did. And again, we simply overwrote ID 99. What if I didn't want to overwrite ID 99? What if we want to go back to the body and we want to see, or I should say, we want to add in, and not on the get, I apologize, I want to come back to the post request here. And we go back to the body, and I want to add in a different ID. So we'll say ID 999, and then let's go ahead and add another book here. And again, we're just adding in this information as JSON data that we're going to be passing to the server. Remember, in the GET request, and as well as the POST request, the content type was application JSON because we're telling the server, hey, I'm giving you JSON data. And this is that JSON data that we are giving the server. So the title of this book is just simply going to be The Sun Also Rises. Whoops, and we'll do a capital R in there. And we'll come down here and we'll say Ernest Hemingway. And we're going to give it a different code. I think we can go back to the 8675309 for the ISBN because that was overwritten. I'll go ahead and click Save. Let's go ahead and click Send. And you can see we get back the ID. The reason I believe it said null prior to this was that we were overwriting an existing entry. This is a net new entry. How can we check? Well, let's just go back to our GET request. Let's run that. And let's see, is Hemingway in here with The Sun Also Rises? He is. However, we're not seeing the ISBN number, so we just go to this other request that we had keyed up where include ISBN is true, sort by author is selected, and we'll rerun that GET request to pull this data from the server, and there it is. Now, as I had indicated, if I click on this, the code is already in here. We could easily copy and paste that into VS Code and run it. So now here's what's interesting. You'll notice that the request was 1.02 kilobytes because we're adding books. I should say the response we received back because we're adding books in. So this is growing. We got a response time of, or a response code of OK, and it was 6 milliseconds. So now let me take you out to the CLI here, where I'm going to show you an example of a Python program that I created called lab455.get.py. Now, this is going to run, and it's going to do something very similar to what we're seeing. We set the URI here, and we are doing a get on the book's URI, which is give me all of the books in the library. Now, I'm also printing out some additional information. I'm going to print out the HTTP status code, which we see in the GUI. I'm going to print out the number of seconds it took to receive the headers from the server, not the body, but the headers. And then we're going to get the response size of the body in bytes. And all the code to do that is right up here. So there's the book's URI, which is just basically the URI for the request. And then we've got the JSON data. That's how you get the JSON data. Here's the HTTP status code and how we would get that. Here's the header response time and how we would do that, elapsed total seconds. So let's run this program and see what we get, and then let's check our output against a request that would be run. All right, so 676 bytes when we ran that GET request, and we did it simply to get all of the books. So if I was to go back to the lab, go back to the first GET request, and let's rerun this, you can see it took 7 milliseconds. Response code was 200. And take a look here. The response size in total is 856 bytes. The body is 676 bytes. So did we get what we were looking for when we ran our script? 676 bytes is the response body size. We absolutely did. So this did exactly what we expected it to do. However, isn't it much easier to leverage Postman in order to do the testing? Because it gives us that nice GUI interface in which to execute all of our HTTP requests, or I should say our RESTful requests that we're making to that library. And then we can go ahead and take that code by simply clicking on the code area over here, pull it into a program, which we can then go ahead and build out little by little in an incremental way. So let me display that one more time, and let me just cat that out. And so that is the program right there. All right, well, hopefully this has given you an idea of the power, the flexibility, and the use of the Postman API development platform. I'm going to be doing another video on the Postman API where we're going to be taking a look at the MapQuest API, something that we're going to become intimately familiar with as we make our way through Module 4 and the rest of the course, because the MapQuest API gives us a very rich set of data that we can collect up, and we can receive that data in JSON format, and then we can write Python scripts to parse that data to pull specific pieces of information out that we might be interested in. All right, as always, I hope that you're learning a lot in this class. I hope you learned a lot from this video, and I hope to see you in the next video.